Have you ever felt that intense urge to just show everybody exactly how smart, capable, and insightful you really are? I mean, of course you have. It's totally human nature. But what if I told you that hiding your absolute greatest asset, your intelligence, might actually be the smartest move you could ever make? Welcome to Arts Grinder today. We're going to dive into a deeply counterintuitive, yet remarkably powerful concept drawn from some of history's absolute greatest minds. We're talking about the strategic advantage of, well, pretending to be a lot less intelligent than you actually are.
It's kind of a jarring question, right? Why on earth would you want to hide your greatest asset? Ever since we're little kids, society constantly tells us to put our best foot forward. Flaunt your achievements, show off your status, and absolutely put your intellect on display. But here's the really fascinating twist. When it comes to the highest human good, wisdom, history's most profound philosophers actually advise the exact opposite. They actively urge us to hide it.
The 17th century thinker, Baltasar Gracián, really hit the nail on the head when he wrote, "You mustn't be ignorant, just feign ignorance." Now, to be clear, the philosophers who champion this strategy weren't telling us to actually behave stupidly or just throw our intellect out the window. Not at all. What they were actually suggesting is the strategic adoption of a mask of mediocrity. It's all about consciously choosing to appear just a bit less insightful than you really are. And they had some very specific, deep psychological reasons for doing this. So here is exactly how we're going to unpack this whole concept today. First, we'll look at the paradox of wisdom. Then, the danger of outshining. After that, flattering the ego. Then we'll dive into the trial of Socrates. And finally wrap up with the ultimate Socratic truth. Let's get into it. Part 1. The paradox of wisdom, or why being smart causes social friction. There's this really profound observation in the novel Flowers for Algernon. Basically, a scientific experiment turns an intellectually handicapped man into a total genius. And he comes to this realization that superior wisdom doesn't just mean you memorize more facts. It means you actually expose the illusions, the deceptions, and the little distractions that comfortably shield everybody else. You literally see through things. And honestly, being around someone who constantly pierces through everyday illusions, well, it makes the average person incredibly uncomfortable. To really get why people get so squirmy and uncomfortable, we have to look at the 19th century philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. He pointed out that when you display superior intelligence, you inadvertently expose the superficiality of the people around you. See, most people get a massive amount of their self-worth from believing they're pretty intellectually competent. So your brilliance, it directly wounds their vanity. It awakens these deep feelings of inferiority, which inevitably mutates into resentment and outright hostility. Schopenhauer actually warned that if you let someone see you are decidedly smarter than them, they will literally thirst for vengeance. Crazy, right? Which brings us to Friedrich Nietzsche's absolutely brilliant solution to this whole mess. The superior mind has to disguise itself. But here's the catch. Wearing this mask of mediocrity isn't some malicious act of deception. It's actually a super bizarre act of kindness. You put on the mask so you don't irritate the majority of people, to basically spare their feelings. You're concealing your depths out of pure pity and kindness, shielding others from the painful limits of their own understanding. It's like you're protecting them from themselves. Part 2. The danger of outshining, and how this impacts your career survival. Okay, so we generally operate under the standard assumption in the workplace, right? Great job performance naturally leads to a big promotion. But Jeffrey Peffer, a professor of organizational behavior at Stanford, points to data that totally shatters this illusion. The actual reality, likability, relationships, and your ability to manage the massive egos of the people in power. That is what truly dictates who gets promoted. So why exactly is likability so deeply tied to managing egos? Well, Schopenhauer gives us this amazing analogy. Think about it. Just as we instinctually walk toward a fireplace when we want to get physically warm, humans instinctually flock toward people who make them feel intellectually warm, meaning people who make them feel superior. If you want to gain favor in the office, you just cannot constantly outshine your colleagues. You absolutely have to provide that psychological warmth. Part 3. Flattering the ego, or the fine art of managing insecurities. Robert Greene lays this out perfectly in his book, The 48 Laws of Power. When you're dealing with people who hold the keys to advancing your ambitions, openly outshining them is just a fatal mistake. If you display way too much talent, you're going to inspire fear and insecurity in your boss. Now, you don't have to pretend to be completely incompetent. Obviously, you still need to be capable enough to earn respect, but you must never appear wiser or more perceptive than the person in charge. You literally have to make your masters appear more brilliant than they actually are.
Now, you might be sitting there thinking, wait a minute, shouldn't a truly wise person just be totally indifferent to the opinions of others? And hey, it's a completely fair point. Total self-sufficiency means you don't need favors, so you really don't care what people think. But let's be real for a second. The vast majority of us live in a state of pretty heavy social dependence. We absolutely rely on the cooperation, the goodwill, and the funding of other people to survive and succeed in our careers. So managing their egos, it's just a highly practical necessity.
Part 4, the trial of Socrates, taking a look at intellectual humility.
Now, the stakes of all this go way, way beyond everyday office politics. Let's travel back in time. It all starts when the oracle at Delphi boldly declares that no man in Athens is wiser than Socrates. Socrates is super confused by this because he genuinely feels he knows nothing. So he sets out to question the politicians and the big experts of his day, and in doing so, he realizes a terrifying truth. Beneath all their supposed expertise, it's really just unexamined assumptions. He publicly exposes their ignorance, and the result? He is dragged into a trial and sentenced to death. It is the ultimate historical proof that publicly unmasking powerful people is, quite frankly, fatally dangerous.
In Plato's Apology, Socrates arrives at this absolutely devastating realization. He says, "This investigation has led to my having many enemies of the worst and most dangerous kind. Because he refused to play the fool, he generated massive hatred. You see, a person can be as humble as humanly possible in their demeanor, but people will almost never ever forgive the crime of standing intellectually above them." Part 5, the ultimate Socratic truth, and what this means for truth and mortality. Okay, so even if you are completely self-sufficient, there is still a profound existential reason to play the fool, and that is humility. Think about it. When we step back and face the massive, unanswerable mysteries of life and death, even the absolute greatest heights of human knowledge are completely trivial. They're just a drop in the bucket. At the end of the day, we are all equally ignorant when standing face to face with the universe. And this right here was the true meaning behind the oracle's riddle about Socrates. Socrates was the wisest man in Athens, not because he possessed some massive encyclopedic knowledge of facts, but because he alone actually recognized the absolute limits of his own understanding. While everyone else was busy mistaking their flimsy little opinions for absolute, unquestionable truth, Socrates was fully conscious of his own great ignorance. True wisdom is knowing that your wisdom is, in the grand scheme of the cosmos, worth nothing. The legendary novelist Fyodor Dostoevsky actually urges us to actively practice this. He says the truly wise person is the one who has the capacity to look in a mirror at least once a month and genuinely call themselves a fool. It requires you to consciously step down from your pedestal. And honestly, it is an incredibly refreshing exercise to just admit to yourself, you know what, I don't have it all figured out. Which brings us to the perfect, absolute mic drop summary of this entire paradox. Courtesy of William Shakespeare, "The fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool." Genuine wisdom doesn't boast. It doesn't need to outshine a boss, or shatter the comfortable illusions of a close friend, or prove its superiority in a crowded room. Genuine wisdom is quiet, it's intensely self-aware, and it is entirely comfortable wearing that mask of mediocrity. So, as we've seen in this explainer, hiding your intellect can protect you from envy, it can actually advance your career, and it anchors you in profound philosophical humility. The strategy itself is crystal clear, but the application? Well, that is entirely up to you. So I'm going to leave you with this one lingering thought. The next time you feel that burning, overwhelming urge to prove you are the absolute smartest person in the room, will you be wise enough to play the fool?